right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte The Pharaoh. Straight out of Tin Mirror Studios in Kings Park, New York. Jimmy, I'm getting that down now, right? I kind of got that whole thing working now without stepping all over my you-know-what, right?
Were you practicing at home, like in the bathroom? Like,
well, I got to keep
it over and over?
My mind doesn't work the same anymore. So for so many years, we had that same line, and it's like very hard to break it. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's routine. It becomes part of the norm. I got you.
So who we have on our wonderful broadcast today, we've got a legend.
Oh, boy.
More than a legend. Iconic.
Oh, yeah.
The great Greg Gagne. Greg, thank you for joining the show, my friend.
Well, thank you guys for having me on. It's a pleasure being on here.
I really don't want to call you Greg. I really feel like I have to call you Mr. Gagne. I got
to. No.
I got to explain something to you, though.
Greg.
Hear me out on this, Greg. We've had so many great stars in here. And, Jimmy, who doesn't get, I don't want to say nervous, but doesn't get super serious. When he realized you were coming on the show, we had a whole new Jimmy. That's the kind of respect that you deserve, man. And, we're WWE guys, right? We grew up in the Northeast, right? We only started catching AWA stuff much later on.
I won't hold it against you guys today, but.
Well, little do you know, you could have no-showed us, but, So,
I'd never do that.
I know. So before we get into this, we want to cover a quick news item. I'd like both of you guys to weigh in, and then we're going to get into the illustrious career of Mr. Gagne.
News item. You're going to do a news item.
One news item.
News item.
And this guy is so important, Jimmy. We're not even going to do commercials on this show. We're bypassing commercials.
Oh, come on, guys.
We are bypassing those
Hope I can live up to this interview tonight.
How's that Jewish guilt feel?
Well, I'm Catholic, and you're Jewish. So I'm going to put you down a few more times here.
By the way, if anyone doesn't know what was happening here, Greg was laying on the Jewish guilt on us because he was supposed to be at a basketball game tonight.
Oi!
And he kind of wanted to make us feel bad that he's doing our show.
My girlfriend went with another guy.
Oh, Jesus!
Oh my God!
Hey, listen, when that guy's done, send him my way. I'll send my wife out with him too. I can only wish someone would go out with my wife, please.
Yeah. Wow.
You said she's one of their sister, but I just saw her. She's in the 10th row with some guy. It's a Jewish guy, too.
What is he eating? A knish? What is going on here? All right, Mr. News Item. What do you got?
Wow.
Give us the news.
All right, hold on. I got to get my bearings here. Video shows man with suspended license zoom into a virtual court hearing while driving. This is in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They got some winners in Michigan. A Michigan man appearing virtually on a Washington County court hearing, I don't know if I pronounced that right, earlier this month, was ordered by a judge to turn himself in after his camera showed him actively driving under suspended license. The incident happened during a hearing May 15th. Corey Harris, 44, was scheduled to attend a hearing for charges stemming from earlier arrest in Pittsfield Township over in South Ann Arbor. The video of the hearing shows the moment when Harris joins the hearing visibly behind the wheel of a car in motion. Michigan. Hold on. Michigan. Stop laughing. Once Harris joined on Zoom, Judge Cedric Simpson immediately asked Harris if he was driving. And then Harris responded by saying, "Actually, I'm pulling into my doctor's office, so give me a second." Thoughts on that, gentlemen? Do we get any stupider than this?
That is my hero. He's so dumb.
Yeah, but that was a pretty good. He came up pretty quick with that one. I'm pulling into the doctor's office.
He's my hero. That's hilarious.
That one, mine too. That's a good one. I have to remember that one.
Look, Mike, if that was in a comedy, you'd be laughing. You'd be laughing.
You ain't kidding.
That's hilarious.
I got to ask this question. Greg, you're in Minnesota still, right?
Yes, I am.
Honestly, how do you live in Minnesota, man? I'll ask the same question from all you guys. Like, what are you doing
in
there?
New York?
Well, listen, New York's not a great place.
Oh, don't even give me that shit.
What do you mean?
Wow. You guys out in New York? Hey, we got lakes, we got beautiful scenery here with the
we have sumps and massive traffic. You lose.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, but on a serious note, you got lakes, you could do boating, you got hunting, but you can't get out of your house but one month a year, right? It's freezing up there all the time.
Well,
Not up there, but in the middle there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I mean, you get used to it. You know,
Okay.
you go out and shovel snow, it's 25 below zero. It's good for you.
Have you ever changed residencies throughout your life?
Pardon me?
Have you ever changed your residency throughout your life?
No, just recently. I was in my original house. So I grew up in Minnesota and was there, lived my whole life there and have 75 years. And now I sold my place after my wife passed away and moved into a little townhouse on here on Long Lake, Minnesota. Got a nice little lake, a great view out here, beautiful sunset last night. My girlfriend and I sat out on the deck, looked at the stars, the Big Dipper pointed straight north. And then I said, the east is that way. That's where New York is. And that's where we don't want to go.
Wow. That's really nice. You know what? You know what's funny though? I wish I had a girlfriend.
I love New York.
I wish I had a girlfriend. That's what I wish.
What are you doing?
Well, I'll see what I can do for you.
Please.
Fly to Minnesota.
No, that ain't happening, bro.
You can crawl in a little igloo in the wintertime, and they're all in there waiting for you.
As great as you are, I'm not moving to Minnesota, my friend. There's nothing dragging me that way. Listen, I want to call you Mr. Gagne, but you told me I got to call you Greg. You do this podcast stuff all the time. You have your own podcast with Magnum TA, which is a wonderful show. But the one thing Jimmy and I were discussing was a lot on these shows. I feel like they don't start it off giving you enough credit for what you did for the industry. So I really want to start off the show, and we mean this wholeheartedly. Thank you for what you've done for the industry and what an influence you have been on the industry. And coming from, again, WWE guys, older guys, it means a lot. It means a lot what you've done for wrestling fans, and we want to say thank you, really. Thank you very much.
That means a lot to me. I really appreciate that, because, it's tough growing up as Verne's son and going through it. But, way back in our training camp, and, we had a pretty good training camp. We had Ken Patera, Ric Flair, Jim Brunzell, the Iron Sheik, Bob Ruggers, and myself. And when I went to my dad and I said, I think I want to wrestle. And he said, what makes you think you can wrestle? And I said, well, I've been wrestling with you downstairs in the living room since I was a little kid. So, and I'd like to do that. I wanted to play pro football, but I came out of there and I really would like to wrestle. I knew he had this camp coming up, and Rick and I went to college together, and he wanted to wrestle. And, and then Brunzell, we played football together at Minnesota, and then he was in semi-pro. And I said, why don't you, come on in? And Verne always said to us, and I'll never forget this, he said, don't try to be somebody you're not. You'll be successful in wrestling if you can be you. And he said, you're going to be criticized a lot. You're going to be compared, and you're not, one of the big guys in professional wrestling. So you're going to have to really learn how to defend yourself and take care of yourself. And when you talk to people, talk from the heart. And be who you are, and don't try to be a me. If people say you're following your father's footsteps, say, no, I'm creating my own footsteps. And I lived by that my whole life, and it's worked for me. Well,
it certainly has. Real quick, before we get going here and discussing, and you could abuse us some more, Power Town Pro Wrestling Figures, right? You're involved in this. I've got my own Kerry Von Erich, which, Jimmy, this thing is unbelievable, dude. This thing, oh my God, it's incredible. Tell me, how is sales going with this? How did you come up with the idea? Fantastic job. This Kerry Von Erich, Greg, unbelievable.
That's the diamond version?
It is.
Is that the diamond version?
Yes, it is. It is the diamond version.
One just sold online for $2,500 the other day.
Bingo, baby. Look at that.
Yeah.
I'm a smart man.
Our first 6 figures that we did, they're called the Ultras. We did Verne and Luthez from the 50s. We did Stan Hansen and King Kong Brody. And then we did Magnum TA and Kerry Von Erich. And the people that do it for us are 2 sculptures, two gentlemen that work with the McFarlane Group, and that's, you know, the biggest company in the world. And they did the designs on these. We want to make them called their Ultra. We make them different than everything else that's out there. And they are so realistic. And what we're getting, the response we're getting is phenomenal. They say they're the best on the market. And unfortunately, we have two collectors on our board in our company, and they feel that we should only make so many of them. And I said to them a few weeks ago, I got a little hot at them. They haven't talked to me in a couple of weeks, but I said, you know, we make $1 or $2 off these things, and they're selling carry by night for $2,500. All the rest of them are like, you know, $300 up to $1,500. So who's making the money? And we found out the collectors are buying them up and holding them back, and then they're going online. Yep. So we're going to change that around. We came out with a Remco line now, and that line's coming out here soon. That'll be a dandy. And we're trying to get to a point where we can come out with a new one every month. Problem with our Ultras, they take from conception and design to the final getting them on the market. It's 9 months, but they're really good.
Well,
I'm glad
you can tell it's 9 months worth of work. And when it came, I was like, this is as good as I thought it was going to be. And again, I'm going to be 57. You know, I'm not a big collector of dolls and stuff like that, but I'm a huge Kerry Von Erich mark, but it was well worth the purchase for sure. I didn't buy it for $2,500 either. So.
Yeah, and Mike, when Steve Rosenthal called me, he did the Remco toys way back for the AWA, and we were the first company that had wrestling on the market. And Steve ran it for about 8 years. It's a funny story. He went to Vince McMahon first because he was from New York, and his son was a big wrestling fan. And his son said, "Dad, why don't you do wrestling action figures?" So he went to Vince, and Vince talked to him, and he looked at the contract, and he said, "No, change this, this, and this. Come on back when you're ready." Steve came back. He said, "I'll make a couple changes here, and I want upfront money." And he said, "Well, how much do you want?" And told Steve the number. Steve went back to the company, came back about 3 weeks later. "Vince, here's the contract, here's the money." And Vince threw a magazine at him, and he said, "Do you know these people?" He said, "Yeah, they're my competitors." He said, "Well, I just signed a deal with them." So Steve got just blown away. So he came to Vern, and we cut a deal with them, and we were the first ones to get the Remco toys on the market, the first action figures of wrestlers. He ran it for 8 years. He did so well, he retired. Call me a couple.
I got to tell you, your father, not in just wrestling, just what you're talking about, the figures, the first ones to market with figures. Think about what innovators both of you were in not just the industry, but just in marketing to begin with.
Well, my dad, you know, he started vitamins way back when he first, right when he came out of the DuPont network in Chicago, and he came back in Minneapolis. I mean, he had a Medtronics. He did a show with Jack LaLanne, and then came out with these Medtronics and isometrics and a book on them, and had a comic book out back in the 50s. You know, he was a marketer. And then he got into the vitamin business, and he did really well with that.
Well, I got to tell you though, you yourself have done such amazing stuff within your career, but probably the most important thing you've done is bringing us Tiffany Stratton. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Gagne. It's the greatest achievement any man has ever done for the male race. Thank you, sir. Thank you forever and ever.
Because she was a little pain in the ass to work with. What you see from her is what you get. But she's come around. She was a fantastic athlete. A friend of mine knew her parents, and he called me one day. He says, "Hey, would you train this young gal to wrestle?" Oh, geez, I don't want to, I like training the guys. I, haven't really trained a lot of the girl wrestlers. And he said, "Well, it would mean a lot to me." And he was a good friend. I said, "Okay, bring her over." And she was a state gymnastics champion. She was only a couple of years in gymnastics, won the state championship. She got tired of that because she was dominating it. She went into weightlifting, and in 1 year, she set a record at her weight class in her overhead press. So then she wanted to try something. She tried bodybuilding. 1 year, she won that. And she came to the camp, and I said, well, this is a little different, kiddo. This is a lot harder than probably what you're used to. Oh, I can do it all. I can do it all. Well, we started out, and about the third day, she came to the camp, and I was training 2 other guys, a Rampage Savage and JDX, 2 young guys that are going to be really good if somebody will pick them up. And Tiffany, she came back, and I got the guys really going hard. And I said, well, where you been? You're late. And I said, well, I'm tired today. I'm sore. And she laid on the mat, and I said, well, then, are you going to get in here? We're going, well, no, I'm just going to watch today. I said, no, you're not. You're going to get in your car, go home, and we're done. And she said, what? And I said, you heard me. Out of here. I'm doing this for a favor to somebody. You're not paying me any money to train you, and I'm not going to take that crap. And if you want to make it in this sport, you can't come here tired, and you're going to be tired on the road. And you're going to come in and tell them you can't wrestle that night. I said, get out of here. Go home. So she said, no. And I said, get out of here. So she left for about 10 minutes and came back. And I said, are you going to work now? Yeah. So she got in the ring and busted her ass. About 3 weeks later, she comes back, does the same thing. And we're at Ken Anderson's training facility. And she pulled the stuff on me again. I said, get out. I'm done with you. And she started arguing with me. I said, hey, you either do it the way I want you to do it, or pack up your bags and find somebody else to do it. And she got real snotty. I said, get in the car and get out of here. And I don't want to see you again. So Ken came over and he said, I can't believe that. Is she like this? I said, this is about the second or third time she's done it. I just sent her out. I'm done. He said, let me talk to her. I said, well, have at it. Good luck. He went out and he couldn't find her. And about 15 minutes later, she came back and he grabbed her outside the door, and she came in and apologized. And from that time on, we were good. She was a quick learner. Man, she was just like that. I could tell she's a natural for it. And, people say, well, that attitude, they think she's putting it on. That's really her. And that's why she's so good at it.
I was going to ask you, Greg, about her it factor, and did you see it factor in her right away? But apparently her real personality is her it factor, if that's what you're telling us.
Well, that's it. And how quick she cut onto the holds, to taking the bumps. I mean, she was my other guys. One guy had been at it for 5 years, and she was bumping better than him. And arm drags and learning the holds. I'd go over the holds with her over and over, old school holds. And I said, you're going to have to learn these. They might not use them a lot, but at some point you're going to need one. And so she absorbed everything and picked up really quick. And so I finally sent her down to him, and rest is history. And
yeah, well,
she's going to be really good.
Yeah, thank you for her, because basically, I feel like she could attain, over time, she's got the ability to attain Charlotte Flair type stuff. I love her. I think she has such an aura. She is everything in the ring. She feels like the complete package. So kudos to you. And I love what you just said, because that's a movie right there. That's a great scene in a movie right there with your interactions with her. So that's gold to me. Greg, do you mind if we switch gears a little bit? Growing up, you obviously played for the University of Minnesota, and that's no small feat in itself. But having the famous father that you obviously had, did you always have it in the back of your head, like, I got to be a wrestler? Or was it instantaneous? What was the moment that made you go, I got to do what my dad does?
I'll tell you this little quick story. My dad takes me to the Minneapolis auditorium. I was probably 6 years old. Ivan and Carol Kamikoff are wrestling Kinji Shibuya and Mitsu Arakawa. And it's a bloodbath. Match is over. My dad takes me back. We're walking down the hallway. The locker rooms are. And here's Mitsu and Kinji in a locker room both on a bed. And the doctors are sewing them up. And I'm looking at them, and I'm just like 6 years old. Go down to the next one. There's the Kamikoffs, doctors with them, sewing them both up. And I turned to my dad and I said, Dad, I know one thing for sure. I never want to be a wrestler. But later on in life, it was, you know, I played at Minnesota, and Vern was a national champion there and an All-American football player there. And met Jim Brunzell there and Ric Flair and, you know, a whole bunch of guys. But I was a quarterback, and Minnesota played a different style of Murray Warmath, old school, run the ball, big guys, big linemen, big running backs, didn't throw the ball much, and I could throw the ball. And Wyoming had recruited me. So after about a year and a half with Minnesota, I transferred up to Wyoming, played quarterback out there, and wanted to be a pro quarterback. And it was out at Wyoming. I did well. We had fall practice. When I transferred, I had to sit out the first year, and then we did the winter program. So the second winter I'm there, and now I'm competing for the number one spot as quarterback. So we went home for Christmas. We get home, and my dad says, "Come on, in the living room, move the furniture, get down here." My mom, she would, "Oh, don't, please, Vern, we don't want to run. Geez, you've been doing this since he's been 5 years old. Don't do it." So we get down there, and he was showing me the moves, and he was putting them on. And finally, he had me down, and I got a little mad, and I gave him an elbow in the nose. He gave me a shot in the ribs, cracked the rib. So now I go back for winter ball at Wyoming, and, you know, the coach says, "What's wrong with you? You're not moving very good. You're not breathing very good." I said, "Well, coach, while I was home, my dad always had this thing. We moved the furniture out, we'd have to wrestle. And I hurt my rib really bad. So they sent me in, and sure enough, I'd cracked it. But they were all laughing about it. They thought it was kind of funny."
You know, Jimmy, we could have had Greg Gagne as a New York Jet quarterback. Could you imagine?
Well, now, why would you wish that upon Greg Gagne?
Yeah, Namath was there. You didn't need me. Shit.
Well, Greg, the Iron Claw came out about the Von Erichs. We had the opportunity to watch that at all?
I have, yeah.
Thoughts?
I watched.
What were your thoughts on the movie?
Well, I called Holly Von Erich. Her and her sister Lacey, you know, they got on board with us with the action figures. And I said, Holly, I just watched that movie. I ran into a friend about 2 months earlier, and he said, "Have you seen the Von Erich movie yet?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "I did." And I said, "How'd you like it?" He said, "It was so depressing." So I was kind of a little hesitant about seeing it. But we finally, my girlfriend and I watched it, and she came out of it. She said, "Oh my God, did that really happen?" I said, "That really happened to that family." And it was depressing. It was a very good movie. I called Holly, and I said, "Holly, man," she said, "You saw it, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah." It was a downer. She said, "I know it." She said, "So how's Kev doing?" I tried to call him a couple of times. She said, "Well, he's having a tough time with it." And but you know, it really hit home. It brings back memories for the family that, you know, little tough.
So let me ask you this, right? Again, we told you we're from the Northeast WWE guys, and we're just fans, right? And we only know what we've learned or heard. And I think our envisionment, and maybe you could clear the air, is I always, after watching the movie, the one person I thought of when they really put Fritz in a light of being this dictator father who drove his kids like a maniac. And I always felt like your father was that way with you. Am I off base there? And the reason I say that to you, Greg, is whenever I see you in interviews, I never hear you say Dad. I always hear you say Vern. And I, and this is just me, I think to myself, man, is there some kind of problem that may have happened, or is there some regret that Greg has with Vern?
No, you know, I always called him Dad at home. I don't know why I call him Vern now. I guess just I don't know. But you know, sometimes I don't know why I do. But
it, Greg? What was it tough
Dad,
though? I mean, how tough was it?
Oh, he was tough on you. I mean, you know, he was tough. You know, he came up the hard way. He came from a family of, you know, he ended up being 18 in the family. His mother
Oh,
died
God.
when he was young, and his dad didn't want him to play sports, didn't want him to wrestle, wanted him to work on the farm all the time. And he used to have to walk to school. And in high school, at Robbinsdale High School, from where he lived, was quite a ways. And he used to tell me what I used to do. I'd run to one telephone pole, walk the next one, then run all the way to school, and then do that all the way back. Plus, you do wrestling practice and football practice and baseball. He played 3 sports in high school, and then went to Minnesota. And Bud Grant, I don't know if you know, Bud was the
Sure.
coach in Minnesota. They were really good friends, and Bud used to tell me they had Vern playing tight end, and he said they had him so out of position. He was still 3rd-team All-American as a tight end. They didn't throw the ball much, and he had good hands. But he said with his bounce, he should have been a linebacker. Bud said he handled everybody on the team, and he did that in the wrestling room too. He was just built that way. And coming up the hard way, he never wanted us, especially me. I was the only boy and 3 sisters. He was hard on me, but it was good for him.
Did he train you harder and push you harder than the other wrestlers he would train? Was he the same with everyone, or did you have to have extra, mileage because you were his son?
And Jimmy, Greg, let me just jump in on that one too. I want to add to that question. Could you identify with the Von Erichs since you grew up in that kind of atmosphere?
Yeah, I could. I didn't know Fritz personally. My dad was good friends with him. They wrestled each other. Vern dropped the belt to him in Texas when he got Dallas going, and then came back a week later and won it back. But Fritz was really solid in the ring. They go on hunting trips together and all that. They were good buddies that way. Seeing it, I don't know if, what Fritz was like with his kids. I mean, if that was what it was like for him, yeah, he was hard on the kids. And Vern was hard on me because he said, it's not going to be easy for you. So you might as well learn it now and learn how to cope with it. And, his philosophy was never let anybody outwork. No matter how big you are, how small you are, no matter what you do, you outwork them. And I remember the first time he ever had me, we had about an acre yard, and I was probably 11, 12 years old. He had me rake the yard. And I raked the whole damn yard in the fall and, picked up all the leaves, put them in the piles where they had to go. And he came home and it was just getting dark. And he looked at me and he said, hey, you missed a spot over there. I said, yeah. Okay, I'll get it in the morning. He says, no, you get it now and you'll do the whole yard again.
Wow.
So I had to go rake the whole yard with the lights on. And I was out there until 10 o'clock. But, he says, you have to learn when you do something, do it right the first time, and you don't have to do it over.
Right.
That's good stuff.
And that was his philosophy. Never let anybody outwork you, no matter what you do.
Hardest working man in the room. On a lot of these interviews, Greg, we don't get to identify the rest of the family members. And, maybe you could just share. I know you mentioned that your wife had passed, which we're very sorry for. Can you tell us a little bit maybe about your siblings and your other family members?
Well, I had 3 sisters, Kathy, Beth, and Donna. And Donna was the youngest one. She became a really outstanding Western horseback rider and won the world championships in St. Louis with a horse. And Beth was kind of a free spirit. And my sister Kathy was the one underneath me. She was a good gymnast, but she didn't like to work hard. And then my kids, my son JP, I kind of brought him the same way I was brought up, and my daughter Gail, and then Pete's the youngest. Now JP and Gail, they have work ethic. It's unbelievable. JP was a 3-sport guy at Cretin High School in St. Paul, Minnesota. football, baseball, and hockey. He was recruited in all three sports. He ended up as a walk-on at Notre Dame. He got a letter from Notre Dame just before he was going to commit to Northwestern, who had offered him a scholarship. And he walked on as a baseball player. And he was an all-freshman Big East pitcher that year, closer or pitcher. He was the third pitcher on the team. And they went quite a ways. And he ended up, when he left there, he was a closer the next 3 years. Two other pitchers that were seniors were drafted. So they came in with all these young guys and sophomores and juniors. So they couldn't throw a lot of innings, and JP could throw. So they made him a closer, and he'd close 2 or 3 games every weekend. And he was a third team All-American, and he was drafted by the Colorado Rockies. My daughter, she played college basketball. She did really well. And then Pete, he played baseball at North Dakota. So they were all, the oldest two are really hard workers. They really got it down. JP is very successful. He's God, what's the company he's with? Anyhow, he was math. His SAT score, he got 100% on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, Jimmy, I think I want to be a Gagne.
Yeah. You want to be a Gagne?
Yeah, I
don't know. Well, hey, Greg, will you adopt a guy from New York?
Only if you're Jewish.
Oi!
Oi!
Oi! Greg, real quick though. I mean, what did the kids think about, the history of their father and their grandfather? Did it ever come up, like over the years? Like,
oh yeah. I mean, JP at Notre Dame, they were all, talk about wrestling. We'd go down there for the games and go out with the team afterwards and the coaches, and they all wanted to talk wrestling, and JP made a big impact there at that school. And he's a stud. And my daughter Gail, she got hired by a company and took over for it. And in less than a year, she put the company up over $2 million into the company. And now she runs the whole thing. And Pete just got a new job, and he's on the road, but he's a good salesman, really good. He's a character.
Mike, it sounds more and more like maybe the Fritz von Erich approach / Verne Gagne approach is not so bad. Sometimes you got to be tough so kids grow up to learn the right lessons. It sounds like that to me.
Totally agree with you, Jimmy. Totally agree with
you. That's what we've lost in our society. There's no discipline.
Correct. You're right. You're right. And if your feelings get hurt, you can go on the keyboard and sprain your fingers. You can complain until the end of time.
I know.
Isn't this awful?
Yeah.
Ugh.
I went to a Catholic school. We had the nuns, and we were scared. Jesus, everyone had a different routine. What they did, one
right.
You'd be quiet, and you'd hear somebody. You hear, and down on the floor, and she'd slide her ring over her knuckle and hit you right behind the ear.
There you go.
One had the ruler, and one had a pointer.
Right.
Lock you in the clothes closet. But there was discipline, and you learned. Now, it's so out of control.
It is. It is. You know what? Those rulers would come in handy now with those keyboard fingers out there. Could you imagine all the smacking going on? It would be great.
Oh, it'd be great.
It'd be great.
Fantastic.
It'd be great. All right, Greg, let's switch gears a little bit. Obviously, for so many.
I'm not boring you with these stories.
No, not at all. Not at all. On this show, we like to talk politics and religion and life. It's much more important than, wrestling.
It's
respectfully.
Go Trump.
Yes. Thank you. Now I even love Mr. Gagne more. This guy rocks.
I hear what they did to him today.
Yeah.
Come on. Even if you don't like Trump, that was wrong.
Look, it's a witch hunt. We all know it.
Guys, in the end, it's all about results, and he'll be the next president. We don't need to sweat it. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
All good. Oh, good. All right. So let's switch gears if we can. Obviously, you're known for many great things in your contributions to pro wrestling history. But to me and Mike especially, back in the magazine days, and of course in WWE, like, watching wrestling and staying in touch with what was going on. I feel like, one of the most iconic things you ever did was the High Flyers with Jim Brunzell. Where would you rank the High Flyers today, like as far as all-time teams, and what's your relationship like with Jim Brunzell to this time, and do you still talk to him? You guys good? And where do you rank the High Flyers?
Yeah, he's got an event coming up for a friend of ours. Jim Carter played football at Minnesota, fullback, and then played middle linebacker at Green Bay and plays Ray Nitschke. He passed away, and Jim's put together this big thing on June 10th, kind of a salute to Jim and what he did for football and for all of us. He was a good guy. But no, Jim's a great guy. And we went to college together, and I talked him into coming into wrestling, and he adapted to it pretty quick. He was a state high jump. He'd set a record in Minnesota. He'd throw the best drop kick in professional wrestling. And where would we stand today? You tell me.
Oh, that's not fair, Mike. He just turned the tables. What are we so?
Well, I'll be fair here. My favorite team to this day, and people give me shit over it, right, is the the East-West connection, Ventura and Adonis. And the High Flyers were one of their main feuds all the time. So the High Flyers always remain very high on my list. Jim's been on the show quite a few times, and he's a really great guy. And but yeah, the High Flyer. Listen, if you remember the name of a tag team at this point in your life, they've made a difference. So yeah, the High Flyers. I mean, God, we've done everything but lick Greg's feet at this point, so I don't even know how to say anything greater about the guy. The guy's awesome.
Greg, how do you think you guys would have done in today's style? There's a lot of High Flyers today. How do you think you guys would have done if you could be in today's landscape?
Well, if we could turn back with younger bodies,
sure.
We'd adapt to that pretty quick because we were both athletic and we could do all that stuff. And I go back when you talk about Jesse and Adrian. They were a great team. Jesse could talk people into the building. Adrian was a good talker. Adrian was a phenomenal performer in the ring.
Yes.
Jesse, you had to work hard with Jesse. I remember a match we had in Denver, Colorado, and it was called a cold match. It was a tag team championship match with Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson, Bobby Heenan, the manager. Pat had been gone for a while and came back, and we were really hot in Denver. So they put us in a championship match with them in the main event, sold out place. And working with those two was in 8 minutes, we wrestled. They had a top wrist lock on us, and they would either pull us by the tights or by the hair. The referee would either be distracted by Pat or Ray or Bobby Heenan. And we finally made a tag. They would get the same hold on the other one. In 8 minutes, there was never a punch or a kick thrown. We had a full-fledged riot.
Wow.
People coming to help us on a top wrist lock. To me, that's when you know you have accomplished the art of professional wrestling.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
As what they called a babyface team, I've had many of the veterans, the Pat Pattersons, Ray Stevens, Bachwinkles, so on and so forth, Jerry Blackwell, guys that we worked with, say we were the best babyface team they'd ever been in the ring with. And I'm not saying that to brag about it, but you asked me, and I went from our peers and the people that told us. I was in St. Louis last week with Barb Goodish, Brody's.
Yes.
She pulled me aside and gave me a little story. She said, when they were promoting here in St. Louis, a couple of the promoters there, they asked Brody, why do you work with Vern's kid? And he said, because he fights back. He has so much fire in the ring. But the size difference, he said, I don't give a shit about the size. He said, we wrestled him in Japan, Brunzell and with Stan Anson and I, and tore the place apart. But they both had fire and they both fought back. And they knew how to sell and die, and not die, but get those people emotionally involved in you. And, you know, we wrestled them 35, 40 minutes a couple nights. And Brody, she said he told the promoters there that he would rather work with me than anybody they had on the card. And that to me was, she told me that just a couple of weeks ago. And that meant a lot.
And that's mastering the art of professional wrestling, sir.
That is.
Right there.
Yep.
Right there. We've had the great Ken Patera on many times, and he tells a story about Sergeant Slaughter beating up Billy Robinson. Can you share your recollection of that?
You know, I only heard about it. I wasn't there when it happened, but I saw Slaughter last week in St. Louis at this convention. And I said, you know, I never really heard the story about you and Billy. But Billy was the kind of guy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. It's my youngest son. Billy would, you know, he helped with Verne at the camp. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah, you're great.
Yes, sir.
All good.
Okay. He would take advantage of us. Get you in a position and drop you on your shoulder or back sideways and stretch you. And I'll tell you a couple of stories. We used to have these parties on Wednesday nights, and Wahoo and Ray Stevens were headed it up. And they made a punch. And in the punch, they had vodka and then whatever pills they threw in there. And they'd always say, don't more than one of these, right? So we're in this nice hotel in Minneapolis, and Brunzell, myself, Flair is there. Flair has now had two of these drinks, and we had this big room, and there was a room on the side, and he would go in, and he would go in there for a couple of minutes, come out with just his cowboy boots on and a cowboy hat, start naked, at attention. Ladies, it's showtime. So Billy Robinson was there, and he was getting pissed off at Flair. And Verne was there, and of course Ray and Wahoo and a few other guys, and we had a ton of women in there, and we don't know what happened, but Billy did something to Flair, and Flair was really shook up. And Verne told us all to get out of the room and close the doors. And we all got out. And it was just Billy and him in there. And the curtains we're all looking in the curtains, and Verne beat the shit out of Billy. And that was the second time, because Billy, like he said, he would take advantage of us. And he tried to take advantage of Sarge one day in the ring and hurt him. And he came up, and I guess the Sarge did a pretty good number on him. But Billy was that kind of a guy. I mean, he was so good in the ring, and he had so many moves, but he had an attitude about him, and it was hard to train with him because you never knew what he was going to do. You know, we're trying to learn how to take a bump and how to protect ourselves, and he's trying to hurt us. And then the last hour of wrestling, we always had to do submission wrestling with him and Verne. And Verne would show us the holds and crank him up a little bit, but then he would, you know, show us how to get out of them and get into another one. Billy, he would put on a submission hold. He'd try to break you in half. You know, when Verne wasn't at the camp. He took advantage of all of us. And I think if you ask Patera, Flair, Brunzell, Brugger's isn't with us anymore, Iron Sheik. He had Iron Sheik one day. You know, he was a Greco-Roman wrestler, and you have to turn the guy. And gosh, we're up to doing 1,000 free squats before we start, and our legs are tight as shit. And Cosmo says, Billy, nobody can turn me. I am a Greco-Roman champion. Nobody. And Billy said, oh, is that right? He said, well, get down on all fours. So he gets down on all fours, and Billy comes and drops a knee right into his thigh. Oh, coach. He could hardly walk for about 2 weeks. And then when he finally was able to get back, then Billy did something else, hurt Cosro's neck, but he'd show something. He'd just take advantage of you when you give him your body. And that's just a prick. Excuse me.
No. It's
So
pretty obvious he was being a prick. That's
Yeah.
How does he make it in this business that way? Anyway, I got to ask you this.
Yeah.
Sticking on Ken Patera, and I got to ask you this. We've had Ken on. He claims he didn't throw that rock through the McDonald's window. Could you please clear this up for us, please?
We don't know.
You don't know?
We listen to him tell the story. He said, listen to this. We know he went to the McDonald's. Here's the story he tells, that they just closed the doors, and he said, I'd like to get a hamburger. We can't
He wanted to eat. I got you.
Ken had a few too. So he said the skinny kid, about 130 pounds, came up, and he wanted to get a hamburger, and they wouldn't allow him. So he said the kid picked up this 30-pound rock and threw it through the window. We said, how much did he weigh? I don't know. He must have weighed 110, 115 pounds. He picked up a 30-pound boulder and threw it 15, 20 feet through this big window. Sure, Ken.
Okay.
So that's what Ken tells, and we were there. So I guess.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So basically, he's full of poop. But all right, we got you.
Greg, this is a tough one, right? You and the great Mike Graham, who unfortunately took his own life. You guys were in WCW, and you guys were part of that machine that almost took Vince McMahon down.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Bischoff worked for you and your father. He ends up being the head of WCW. What's the heat between you and Eric? Why the problem?
Yes, he's got a problem. Well, here's the deal. We were having a tough time, the AWA, and Vince was hammering on us. He took all the talent, and it was just getting out of hand. And one day Bischoff came to me and he said, I'd like to, can you help me get into WCW? And, and I was just going to go, I was down there working with Bill Watts at the time. And so I made a call down there and got him in there. I told Bill, hey, he's an announcer, he's real green. Got him down there. So then I'm down there with Bill, and one day Bill calls me in the office. He says, we're having a little booking meeting. There was, 4 or 5 of us there, and Mike was there. And he said, he came in, he was late coming. He says, sorry, I'm late. They got this thing, an executive producer for the TV show. And I said to Bill, should I go down there? He said, no, they got Tony Schiavone down there, Joe Pedicino, some other guy, and Bischoff. It's not a big deal. So we did all our booking. We go to the next day, Mike and I have to drive to South Carolina. We're there, we're finishing up the show. Bill pulls in, and he walks in and he says, well, guys, you got a new boss. I got fired. Eric Bischoff's your boss. Eric came to us selling ninja suits out of the trunk of his car, and he was trying to get it to do a commercial in our TV show. Vince had just stole our last announcer on Friday, and this was a Friday. The kid didn't show up, so we're going to do our interviews on Monday. So Mike Shields, one of our producers, said, I think I can take this kid and make him an announcer for us. So he worked all weekend with Bischoff, and that's how I became an announcer. And then I got him the job down at WCW, and then he ended up firing me. Little controversy. he called me one day and he said, "How do we turn this thing around?" And I said, "Well, the only way to turn this thing around is you got to get Hogan away from McMahon." "Well, I don't even know him." And I said, "Well, I know him and I have his phone number." I said, "But here's the deal." Because Eric had screwed me out of a couple of things earlier in that. I said, "Here's the deal. I'll get you Hogan, but for that, I want a percentage of what he signs for and a small percentage of his merchandise." "Okay, I'll get that for you. I'll go to Bill Shaw. I said, "Get me the contract and I'll get you Hogan." So I called Hogan, told him what was going on. And this was a Monday or a Tuesday. Went through the whole week. Came in the next week. I said, "Eric, what are you doing? You got the contract ready? You got to get Hogan?" I said, "I'll get you Hogan. Get me the contract. I'm not going to get screwed around again. Get me a contract." "Well, Bill's out of town. He'll be back this week." "Okay." So on the following Thursday, I said, "Eric," I said, "Hey, I got home for the weekend. And where are we with Hogan?" "Well, when you get back, we'll take care of that." So I came back on Monday and I walk in and they got a big sign, "Welcome Hulk Hogan." And I went in and Bischoff wasn't there. And I'm a little hot. And then he called me on the phone. In fact, he called me Friday before I went in there. And he said, "Hey, you're fired." And I said, "Fired for what?" "You know what?" And he hung up on me. So I told my wife, I said, "When I go in there Monday, I may not come back because I'm going to throw him right through that window on the 14th floor." And that's when I walked in there and saw the Hogan sign. And then he didn't show up for about 2 or 3 days. And I finally went home, and that's the way it went. So if there's hard feelings for Eric Bischoff, that's what they are.
Unreal.
And that's the true story.
He's a worm.
Yeah, he really is.
Sounds like a worm.
Now he goes around doing seminars and stuff. I mean, this guy, my dad always said, if you can't say something nice about somebody, don't say anything at all.
Well, the whole point, Greg, I don't think Mike or yourself get enough credit for what honestly, Vince has been the king of this sport for a very long time. And if it wasn't for you two guys, you don't even get to the NWO. It doesn't even happen.
No.
And it's a little bit disappointing that people won't, even at this point, he won't give you your flowers.
Well, it's my dad worked really close with Bill Watts, Eddie Graham. Those were two guys he really counted on. And with Fritz, they traded talent, and Stu Hart. And, those are the guys with the foundation of professional wrestling. They're the guys that train more wrestlers than anybody in the country. Verne had trained 144 wrestlers over the years, and only maybe 3% didn't make it to main event stature.
Amazing
from
stat.
Open Anderson.
That's amazing.
Blackjack Lanza, Blackjack Mulligan.
Wow.
Dale Lewis. God, just the list goes on and on and on. And all big names, and they all made it big. And then he would trade talent with Eddie, and Eddie would trade with the Crockett's. And Eddie was training a ton of people down there, and they had the same philosophy, and Mike and I had it. And that philosophy always worked in wrestling. WWE has done a phenomenal job. I don't take anything away from them. I think the direction they're going right now with Triple H and The Rock in there, that nobody can touch them.
It's great.
And they've done more for professional wrestling, than any other company, but it still hurts. And Mike was very good booker. We thought alike. Dusty was down there with us for a while, and Dusty was in charge, and then he left. And but we had a couple of other great guys in there with the booking, but we all had that same philosophy. And maybe it was too old a philosophy and didn't work well, but we thought we were on the right track.
Greg, I want to switch gears a little bit. It's obviously very important, AWA's contributions to the history of this sport. But just like real life, there's good and bad people behind the scenes I can't think of anyone worse, and I hate to bring him up, but I wanted to get your feelings on him. I can't think of anything worse or anyone worse than Rock and Roll Buck Zumhofe. What was it like when he worked for you? And what do you feel about, how do you feel about what he's done? I mean, what's your opinion on it?
Well, he's just not a very bright guy. Came from nothing, got into wrestling, let it all go to his head a little bit. Big star, got a little bar going, and then got himself in a lot of trouble. And he was like that all the time. And I had a couple confrontations with him, and so did Jim. We saw him with younger girls. We said, "Hey, knock it off and stay away from him." And I told him one night, I almost hammered him in the locker room in Rockford, Illinois. He had done something with some young girl, and it was not good, not good. And, Buck, unfortunately, let the business go to his head and thought he was bigger in life than what it really was, I guess. But he had a thing for young girls. Got him in trouble.
Finally, a man with moral fiber. Thank you, Mr. Gagne. Finally, someone that, standing for something and is going to say it. I know you're not close to the situation, but I really need you to weigh in. Vince McMahon's being accused of a whole bunch of issues. I don't need to go into that issues. I wanted to know what you thought about this whole situation.
Boy, you guys are on top of it, huh?
Sorry.
I'll tell you, Vince hired me, and it was more for, him, his ego, and, I didn't put the Gagnes out of business to hurt, all the bullshit. Okay. So I went to work for him, and he listened in the bookings and all that. And Vince was himself, not really what I was used to being around. But we're making a trip from New York to California. We're wrestling in LA. And we get on the private plane, and Triple H and Stephanie are in front of me. Vince is across the aisle from them. I'm right behind Stephanie. And then they had some of the producers and that in the back, and a couple of the other guys that were bookers with us were in there. And Stephanie all of a sudden turns around and he says, "My dad made Hulk Hogan." I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "Stephanie, no, he made him." I said, "He was floundering in New York." And I asked him one night, he was almost in tears. He came and he said, "I can't make it in wrestling." And I said, "Why don't you come to the AWA and we'll take care of you there. We'll make you a wrestler." So I went back, I told Vern about Hulk Hogan. I said, "God, this guy, he needs a lot of help, but he has got so much potential." So Vern said, "Well, get him in here." And I gave him Vern's number, and we didn't hear from him for about 3 months. And at about 2 months, my dad said, "What about this Hogan guy?" I said, "I don't know. I gave him your number. Maybe he doesn't want to make the move, but he needs some help and he'll be really good." So all of a sudden he called about 3 months after I'd seen him. And Vern said, "What's I do? Bring him in." And Vern heard him do an interview, and he said, "God, we got to put somebody with him." So he put Johnny Valiant with him. They did some interviews, and we went to Milwaukee for a card, and he walked out and the place was sold out. And he was like on the second or third match, but he walked out, and he was the Johnny Valiant, who was a heel and hated in Milwaukee, but the people cheered him. And I went home and I said, "Dad, this guy's not a baby face. I mean, not a heel. He's a baby face." The people went bananas over him. So Vern brought him back in, and Vern started helping him with his interviews and told him, on these comebacks, you got to just shake. So what they did is they put him in 6-man tag team matches with Jim and I, and we kind of coach him through the match. We'd be working an arm on somebody, and we'd tag him out and say, twist the arm, drop the leg, grab the arm, tag out, and let him get the feel of the match and how to control the match. And he caught on real quick. And then I remember we went to the Chicago Horizon. We're wrestling Blackwell, Ray Stevens, Nick Bockwinkel, Heenan in their corner. And it's Jim and I and the Hulk. And we got in the Rosemont. The place is sold out. And he did that pose. And I told Jim, grab his T-shirt. We both grabbed from one side and tore it off real slow. And those people went, well, I think that's the night that the light went on for Hulk. I mean, he had Stevens and Blackwell and Bockwinkel, and we were just letting him in when he had control. We gave him a big comeback at the end, and those guys were bouncing all over him. And that's when he became Hulk Hogan.
Greg, I got to ask you, I need to understand.
Well, real quick, Jimmy, before you, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
Sorry. But Greg.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the Vince McMahon situation?
He tried to get out of it.
He tried, but I couldn't let it go, Jimmy.
Right.
I need to know Mr. Gagne's opinion, please.
All right. So we had a little argument there, Stephanie and I, about the thing, and it got cooled down. We get to LA, have the matches, we get back in, and so we're sitting in the same seats, and he had an older guy, producer in the back, and I don't know, maybe we're an hour and a half out of LA, and Vince is talking like crazy, and we're listening, and all of a sudden he takes an ice cube and he fires it back and hits this older guy right in the head with the ice cube. And the poor guy, I said, what are you doing? I said, for Christ's sake, Vince. He said, nobody sleeps on my plane. And I said, you've got to be fucking kidding me. What's wrong? Excuse me, guys.
No, you're
said,
good.
No.
You're good. You're good.
I said, what's wrong with you? Nobody sleeps on my plane. So he keeps talking away and we're listening to him. And all of a sudden he picks up an ice cube and he hits the guy again. This cut the guy right over the eye. And I went a little ballistic. What is wrong with you? Are you nuts? Come on. Let the guy sleep. Look at, he's an older guy. Nobody sleeps on my plane. Don't you get it? So it was shortly after that, I got the axe. So what do I think of him? He's a guy that let his ego get in the way.
So do you think there's validity to some of the charges?
I don't know anything about the charges. I don't want to just guess.
Okay.
I'm just telling you that there's some guys in sports, the guys that came up the hard way, you never have a problem with. The guys that got in the easy way and made it, they see their egos get out of control. And Vince, I think, was always in the shadow of his dad. And when he got control, and the power he had and what he wanted to do, you got to give him credit. I mean, he had the balls to go out and do what he did.
Mm-hmm.
Go after everybody in everybody's territory. And it worked for him. But as a person, that incident really kind of gave me a whole different outlook on him. And just listening to him in the booking office and the way he talked to people and talked down to people, I wasn't brought up like that.
So would it be fair to say, Greg, that even though you don't know the charges, you can see Vince McMahon maybe doing this considering what you've experienced yourself?
I don't think he's Hulk Hogan once said, Vince will do anything.
All right. Well done, sir. And a great answer. Fair enough.
Greg, I really need to understand, though, about the one that got away. How did your father and yourself, I don't know how much you were directly involved. Maybe you could spell that out more. How did you guys let Hulk Hogan go? Is there something you could have done differently? Do you think about that over the years? I would assume you do.
Yeah. Oh, I tried to talk to him. We had here's the deal, guys. We had Hogan and he wanted to be champion. And the AWA was really hot. We were really hot. And CBS had called us. This was about August of what, 82?
Okay.
They'd called us and they said, what we'd like to do, we'd like to do a TV show, a 2-hour TV on CBS on a Saturday night in April. And they made Vern and I sign a confidentiality. They didn't want anybody to know about this. They wanted to do a big deal on it. So we had our battle royals coming up September, usually September through October. And then the winners met the champions, you know, in the different cities in November and December. And Hogan had won some, so he gets a shot at Bockwinkel, and he didn't win the title. That was in November. And then in December, we had booked all our major cities. Christmas week was always sold out, you know, Winnipeg, St. Paul, Denver, Chicago, San Francisco, Milwaukee. So they booked us in 6-man tag team matches, Hulk with Jim and I against Bockwinkel, Stevens, and Patterson or Blackwell, whoever it was at that time. And the first night we're sold out in St. Paul. I called Hogan Christmas night. I said, hey, where are you? Well, I'm not coming. I said, what do you mean you're not coming? He said, I cut a deal with New York. And I said, well, Hulk, you don't do business that way. You know, finishing up Christmas, your matches that we got going here, and then leave. Then there's no hard feelings. You got to do business the right way. Well, Vince is paying me more not to stay home, and then to make the shows. And what had happened, our last battle royal was in Phoenix, and Andre was there and Hogan, and they were getting on a plane to Japan. Vince met him on the plane in Japan and signed him to a deal.
Amazing.
So when he came back at Christmas week, so now for our April deal with CBS, we don't have Hogan and Bockwinkel. So they didn't do the show for us. But it really hurt us because all those sellouts and he didn't show up. It really, really hurt. And he'd have made more that week than what Vince paid him.
Greg, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about, you know, how would you describe Hulk Hogan the person? Is he an honest guy? But it sounds like, you know, did you ever, you know, make up with him over the years? Were you pissed at him? You must have been pissed at him.
I was mad, but I just tried to explain to him. I mean, here was his first opportunity. He finally was getting it. Hulkamania was developed in the AWA. That's where it was developed. And, you know, I said, Hulk, just fulfill your commitments. That's the way it's always been done. If you want to go somewhere, we're not going to hold you back from going somewhere, but fulfill your commitments. Don't burn bridges. I mean, I thought I was pretty good friends with him.
Right.
And you know, that one really hurt. But we've talked over the years. I mean, it is what it is. Wrestling is where it is now because of what they did. And, you know, they're doing fantastic. And I give the guys credit. Triple H has done a fantastic job, and The Rock bringing this thing worldwide. And, you know, Vince was responsible for building that platform for him.
And again,
Greg,
you've done more important stuff like bringing us Tiffany Stratton. So again, that always trumps everything. Jimmy, I want to respect.
That's all I'm good for, guys.
I want to respect Mr. Gagne's time. First, I want to give a shout out to our advertiser from the gym administrator, Sal Corrente, who got us the opportunity to interview this incredible legend. I've got my nerd question, and I want to close out with what we call the Pharaoh's final question, Greg. Again, we want to thank you for joining Long Island's #1 pro
I got
wrestling
to thank Sal, too, for putting it together. Sal's a great guy.
Incredible, man. And I'll tell you what, you are a great guy. You're honest. You answer the questions brought forward, and I hope we didn't. I'm going to hit you with a nerd question. I do apologize.
Let me get a plug in here for Power Town.
Go ahead. Go.
PowerTownWrestling.com. You can see all the action figures that we've got coming up. And all the newsletters that we got up there. I mean, you got to take a look at it.
I think I'm going to go get a Stan Hansen, Greg. Are those still available?
Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Time out. I have to ask this as a new member of the McDaniel family. Are we getting the Wahoo McDaniel figure or what?
It's coming up next in the Ultras.
All right. More importantly, what you should have said, Jimmy. Greg, will there be a Monte the Pharaoh figure coming out?
Down the road.
There you go. Diamond edition. Way down the road. Wow, Greg. You know what? Words hurt, Greg. Words hurt.
Hey,
just so you know.
Here's the deal.
What, like down?
I have signed 247 women, men, little people, referees, promoters. And we really are, and we didn't know it was going to take this long on the Ultras every 9 months. So that's why we came up with the Remco line. We've got other merchandise we're working on coming up so that these people that built the foundation, we started the guys in the 50s, Lou Thez, Yukon Eric, Don Leo Jonathan, The Crusher, Wilbur Snyder, Gene Kaninsky, that whole crew that really built wrestling on TV in 1950. We wanted to represent them and the people that didn't have the opportunity to make money in merchandising like they're making now.
What about a Ventura and Adonis? Are you going to come out with one of those?
Yes, we've got them both on board.
Oh, my God. That's great. All right. Here comes the nerd question. We're going to hit you with the Pharaoh's final question. Greg, Road Warriors, AWA Tag Team Champions. You bring in the Freebirds. How in the world did that matchup not work? Why did it not work?
Well, I guess egos. I mean, that's all I can say. I mean, it should have. I mean, it drew well. Road Warriors. They came and they were from Minneapolis, and they sent. My dad trained Ole Anderson, and Ole, Road Warriors were trained by a guy named Eddie Sharkey, and they didn't get the kind of training that really they needed, and they were just. When Ole got them. And they were big and strong. He just wanted them just to go in and, knock the crap out of everybody. And that's what they did because they couldn't work that well. Later on, they started to catch on. And I don't know why. I mean, them and the Freebirds, you would think they'd have some phenomenal matches. We had some good matches with the Road Warriors. I remember Joe one night in Winnipeg, these guys would try to take advantage of you, So we took advantage of them. We got Joe down we were in a cage match with him in the Indian Deathlock. And I don't have very big legs. But I had it locked in there pretty good. And his legs were so big, it was really tight. And he says, "You're going to break my effing leg." And he sat up and I slapped him. I said, "Well, you're not going anywhere till I let you go." So I slapped him another time. "I'm going to kill you when I get up here." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to let you get up. I might break your leg." Oh, he was mad as hell, but we ended up having a really good match with him.
All right, Jimmy.
Is that enough story for
It's
you?
a great story, Greg. And so we got something called the Pharaoh's final question. Greg, I don't know what he's going to ask. It's not scripted. He may ask if you wear boxers or briefs. I have no idea.
What?
Jimmy, go ahead, buddy.
Okay. Well, I'd like to get two this time because it's Mr. Gagne. So let me real quick, if you can for me quickly, Greg.
Okay.
Okay, Greg. If you can for me quickly, can you tell me your memories of Wahoo McDaniel, the wrestler? And then I have one more question I want to end it with.
Well, he was a tough son of a bee, boy. When you were going in the ring with Wahoo, you better be ready. We'd just go out and watch just to listen to those chops. Guys just hated when he hit him. He'd tear the skin right off the bones. But he was a phenomenal athlete, one of the best athletes ever in professional wrestling. All pro football player, all American. I mean, he was just a great guy on top of it.
Awesome.
Story. Can I tell one Wahoo story for you?
Sure.
You have time?
Yeah.
Sure.
So Ray Stevens, Wahoo, and I are going out to South Dakota. We got a big match out there. And it was a gentleman that owned a grocery store chain. They wanted to take us pheasant hunting. And, Wahoo was a big hunter. He loves to hunt. So we throw the shotguns in and we get out there, and this guy's got about 30 guys. And in South Dakota, you go through the cornfields. It's thousands of pheasants. So you have to have blockers. So they said, hey, Greg, do you know how to block? I said, oh, yeah, I hunt quite a bit. We go down the end of the cornfield. And Ray Stevens, so I know how to block too. So Ray and I would go down to the end of the field. And what you do is they drive them. So when the pheasants see us at the end, they're going to get up. So no shooting pheasants on the ground, none of that. We got all of it. Ray, you know what to do? Yeah, don't worry about me. So they're at the other one end, we're down at the other end waiting, and all of a sudden we see these pheasants, thousands of them come running up, and there's a little knoll in the cornfield. And here comes the pheasants. And I said, Ray, look at the pheasants. I look at Ray, and he's got his gun up. And I said, Ray, you can't shoot. They come up over the hill, and they're all screaming, don't shoot, don't shoot. Ray shoots. Wahoo's feet go straight up in the air. He shot him. And Wahoo comes up. He's got a BB stuck in his head. He's bleeding, and he's got his shotgun up, and he says, Stevens, I'm going to kill you, son of a bitch. And Ray, he's pointing at him, and the people just scatter.
Oh.
So we never got a bird out of the field. They're all up there shaking. And they told, you take Ray and go way down there. And I said, well, I'm done hunting. I'll take Ray home. And it broke up. They didn't get too many pheasants that day. But yeah, Wahoo with that one BB stuck in his head, knocked him. His feet went right up in the air, and they're screaming, he shot him.
So you bagged a bird and an Indian. Very interesting hunting trip.
That Wahoo and Ray, what a pair they were, hunting and fishing, and everywhere we went, they brought their shotguns and their fishing poles.
Beautiful. Okay, let me get in my final question. You gotta forgive me in advance. This is the final question. We know that notoriously he's known for poor eyesight, but would you like to say anything to Stan Hansen for somehow conveniently flattening the AWA title while he plows his corn? I know he's got bad eyes, but any thoughts on that?
It was a little misunderstanding. Stan's a great guy. Stan is a great guy. You know, he's a competitor, and there was something he didn't like about something that was going on, and the belt disappeared and it came back. He'd taken a sledgehammer to it and sent it back to us.
Oh boy.
We've talked about it over the years and have fun, but Stan and King Kong Brody, you know, when you look up, I see a matchup with the high flyers, you wouldn't believe it. But we had phenomenal matches with those guys here and in Japan, especially.
All comes back to mastering the art of professional wrestling, and there it is right there, folks, right there.
So if you want to put our tag team somewhere in there, put us up there.
Well, they are up there.
I know where I think we should be.
They are up there. Mr. Gagne, I want to thank you again for taking the time out. Then thank you for what you've done for wrestling fans, what you've done for this industry. Your father is an icon in this business, as you are. Thank you again, and thank you for taking your time out. If anyone didn't know it, Greg was supposed to go to the Timberwolves game, and he stuck around for the interview.
And I lost my girlfriend. She probably picked up some guy, and she's done now. She won't come back home tonight.
But
oh boy,
thanks, guys.
On a serious note, God bless you, Mr. Gagne, and thank you again for everything.
I want to thank you guys for having me on, and Sal Carini for putting it together. Sal's a great guy. He's helped me get a lot of this talent that we have on board, almost 250 that we have signed now, and we've got some big surprises coming up.
Well, the biggest news of the night, this is now worth $2,500, boy, and I am jacked and ready to go.
Mike, that's a low print. You better hold on to that. It's going to keep going up. It's a low print.
Well, that's for sure. There's not many of them. I think there's only 2,000 of them that were made.
Thanks again, Mr. Gagne. God bless. Have a great weekend. Be well.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Jimmy, the great Greg Gagne.
Oh, man. I loved every millisecond of that one, Mike. I got goosebumps, bro. Sorry.
Really? Hey, you're still on. I'm still hearing it. So don't be. There we go.
Oh, what are you still doing here? Get out of here. Get out of here. Leave now.
Wait a minute. He's in the chat.
I don't know how to get out of it.
There's this thing
Well,
called
great wrestler, great businessman, but fuck doesn't know how to use a computer, bro.
No, I know. I'm 75 years old. There, I'm back on.
Leave us alone, Greg Gagne. Leave me alone.
What fucking button do
Well,
I
Greg,
hit?
since
can't
you're
get
since
off
you're
the
on,
air.
Jimmy, hold on. Since you're on, can you please send us out? Tell them you're watching Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte The Pharaoh, Mr. Gagne, so we can end this broadcast, please.
Well, I might have you guys all night with me here.
Move your lips, Greg. Just move your lips.
If I'm still here next week, we'll have you on our show.
For Mike Monte and for Jimmy Farrow, and of course the legend Greg Gagne, you have been watching Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte The Pharaoh, seen by over 150,000 people in New York and throughout social media. God bless you all. Have a wonderful weekend.
Don't forget our podcast, The Boss.